Well, gentlemen, we're trying a new idea. This is the first time the user group has done a panel, so I hope you can appreciate some of the us figuring out as we go here, or winging it, as they say. That's kind of my style sometimes. Tends to work out just fine, though. We are really lucky to have these three gentlemen up here speak for us about their technology past, present, and future abilities. I look up and respect all of them. I've known them for many, many years, and I'm going to do a quick set of intros. But before we do that, the topic for today is how do you Azure? And that means many different things. We have a couple prepared questions around this topic, but by no means do we have to go through all of them. I'm hoping to maybe take a question or two from the rest of us in the room to make sure that, if you've got questions or you've got thoughts or dreams, hopes, and aspirations around using Azure, that at least someone in the group can be able to answer. So that's the idea for today. In case you don't know me, I'm Brian McKeever. I'm one of the organizers of the group, joined by Matt Chahan, another organizer, Cameron, Mike, and Jay. So a lot of organizers here. That's fine. Should give a quick round of applause to Cameron and K Group Companies for hosting. Thank you very much. Cameron, appreciate it. This is what, your third time? Second, third, fourth?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there?
Fourth, yeah.
We've been here before. We'll just say that. It's a great location because it's right here in downtown Grand Rapids. So normally easy to get to, except for today, lots of traffic, at least for the two of us. All right, so without any further ado, I would like to introduce, I guess I'll go in the order of closest to farthest from me. JVR, as he's affectionately known, John Van Rosen, is owner and principal consultant at JVR Enterprises. Jay is an experienced Microsoft developer with over 30 years of experience. I highlighted that. Over 30 years of experience.
A lot of people here.
And designing and implementing solutions for a diverse range of clients. Fun fact about Jay, I've known Jay for roughly 23 or 24 years. And one of the things you may know about him is he is musically inclined, and I watched him perform in his band many, many years ago at many parties together when the tech scene was just first bubbling up here in West Michigan. Correct me if I'm wrong. Diggy Johnson was the name of the band.
Diggy Johnson, yeah.
Had to pull that way back from the memory ranks.
A lot of late nights, yeah.
A lot of late nights, but we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We did do some work together, too. Other stories. Next to Jay is Jay number, actually, I'm not gonna, J, A, and B. So no, you guys decide which is which. Jay Tower. Yeah, wasn't going to do that. Founding partner of Trailhead Technology Partners, and if you don't recognize him, Jay has spoken at our user group last fall-ish.
Yeah, sounds right.
And helping out more this year as well. But like I said, founder and partner of Trailhead Technology Partners, a custom software consulting shop with employees across the U.S., Europe, and South America. He's a 10-time recipient of the Microsoft MVP Award for his work in .NET and his frequent speaking at software conferences around the world. In fact, next month, Australia.
Yeah.
Is where Jay will be speaking. So we're very lucky to have him here. One thing you may not know about Jay is he climbed 2 mountains last year. Did I get that right?
Was it last year? I don't know. Maybe that's
Definitely wasn't 2025, so I'm going last year.
Yeah. Okay.
And his knee
That
is
was a little bit of news to him.
I'm sorry. I mean, you did do that, right?
I did do that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, his knee is still recovering from that. And certainly, just in order of farthest away from me, Mike Sweeney. Mike is a senior specialist, global black belt at Microsoft. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good job.
Okay. I'm going to let him explain what that means. But he's worked at CDW, Wolverine Worldwide, Independent Bank, and other enterprise organizations in his career, and as an expert in multiple networking, cybersecurity, IT operations, cloud migrations, and general IT best practices. Well-versed and a great local asset. And fun fact about Mike, he's the founder of this user group that we're now sitting in right now. So that's one of the reasons that we're all here. So awesome to have you guys here. Let's give the recipients a quick round of applause. Thank you guys for your amazing contributions.
We'll let Mike be on the panel even though his name doesn't start with a J.
I know. I
Yeah.
was thinking I should have sat in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Separate
We'll work on that next time. So, we have a couple categories of conversation today. Let's start with maybe one of the ones that our panelists are more prepared about, and I'm hoping is an easy one. And I want to start with you, Mike, because I don't know this answer with you. When and how did you first start using Azure, and what inspired you to do so?
Well, I got a job at Microsoft, so
Helps.
that helped.
Yep.
So I came into my role, I was in messaging for a lot of my career. I kind of was a generalist, so I did a lot of different things. Got a job at Microsoft in an account support role, and real quickly realized I want to get back into tech, so I got into the Azure space. And so, oh yeah, I see Russ is smiling over here because I was supporting Russ's team at Meyer. And then wanted to get back into the tech space, so I took a job where I could be in Azure. So I started learning about it, started leveraging it more. I knew a little bit about it, but really cut my teeth in the role and using my past experiences to make my Azure learnings move faster. So that's really how I got into it. Now I'm kind of all over the board with it. Been in it for about 5 years.
Follow up quickly. Explain the black belt thing.
Yeah. So the black belt role at Microsoft is up until last year, I was always in a field role, so I was helping customers directly. The black belt role is a layer in between the field and the product group. So I work very close with the product group to make sure that features are added to our different products, but then also work very closely with the customers to understand where their challenges are, and we work at specialist roles to help solve problems and make sure you guys are successful in Azure.
Awesome. Who wants to go next, J, A, or B? Again, no favorites.
Go ahead, J.A.
Oh, okay.
How did I get to be J.A.?
How I personally got into Azure. Well, Microsoft developer since '93, I guess, so familiar with the tools. I did not get into cloud for a long time, and it's really only been a couple years. 3 years full time. I did way back in the day do a little project where I helped out Matt for a couple weeks on an Azure project that he was architecting. That was some of my earlier exposure to Azure, and just the familiarity that I've always had with the Microsoft tools and the comfort level. It felt natural to me, and I've tried some AWS, and just being in Azure feels very familiar just from the beginning. So easy to find everything that I need, and I've been loving it. Yeah.
So did the project require that you actually go in Azure? Is that what?
This current project, yeah.
Okay.
They wanted Azure developers on this project, and I kind of weaseled my way in on that. So then became an Azure developer.
All right.
All right. Like Jay, I've been using Microsoft technologies for development for decades at this point. And so I got involved fairly early on in Azure when it was basically just VMs. Remember that era? Mm-hmm. Most of my career has been as a consultant, but at this point in my career I was like an internal team lead of a team of developers. And we had a really slow performing application that probably just needed to be completely rewritten, but instead we moved it into Azure and moved it onto a beefier VM than what it was running on, and problem solved, right?
Virtual left.
Yeah. Let the hardware solve the software problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, Azure's changed a lot since back then to today. And one of the things that I think might be interesting for us all to hear is, has there ever been a challenge in your usage of Azure that really stopped you or really got in the way or was memorable for what the heck is going on here? And then maybe how did you get around it?
I can answer first, I guess.
Sure.
The two things that come to mind immediately for me is telling clients, you should move on to the cloud so that you're not managing things yourself and so that things are more reliable. And then a couple of very well publicized Azure outages that have happened over the years, happening shortly after those, feeling like you got egg on your face, and then obviously that happens anywhere, so it's a pretty easy cover story there. But the other one that feels like it's been a challenge over the years, because of being involved since the beginning, is the number of things that have kind of come and gone. So I'm thinking of like web worker roles early on, or that type of thing, where you move a bunch of stuff onto something and then a year or two later that something is going away and you have to move it onto something else.
I resonate with that very much. Anybody else in the audience have you ever had to use something that just isn't there anymore? Yeah. Okay. A couple shaking hands. No live or super responses, but that's fine. Mike, you got anything on that?
Yeah, so in my roles, I help solve problems for our customers a lot. So a lot of the big challenges that I see are things changing are one of them. But I kind of attribute that to the cloud being the cloud, right? So if you are in the cloud, you know things are going to move fast. You can't rely on the old school mentality of building a data center and letting it sit there for 10 years. But what's really challenging, especially right now, is capacity problems around the world because AI is coming up such a big thing. Everybody's investing all their resources in that, and then that's causing problems for our customers. So for all of us trying to put things out there, so that's a big challenge. And then deprecating AIs, deprecating resources that you come to rely on are always a challenge.
Any secrets you have about when people hit that consumption limit or quota limit of like there are no resources left in this region? Do you have any input on how to get around that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways you can approach that. So one thing that is actually it's genius that one of my peers just started doing was he's developing stuff for to lab out so he can show customers things, and he built a script where you can go and check all the regions if the SKU is available that you're looking to deploy, and then it'll give you a capacity rating based off of that. So that's a good way to proactively approach it. But if you're already established, some of the conversations we have with customers are like look at alternative options. So if we're talking VMs, maybe a different SKU will line up, or if it's a service, maybe we could look at a different service or a different deployment of that. Or we start looking at other regions and that are adjacent to it and see how we can connect those regions and provide the level of service that you're looking for. So there's a lot of ways, and there are also ways to work within the boundaries of if you get a capacity error through like trying to deploy something and you get it opens up a ticket says you can't deploy it. If you have an account team, you can work with that account team to potentially get past that too. So it just depends on the scenario and everything. It's lots of variables.
It's great too.
So I guess any challenges we had aren't really Azure specific. I think the biggest challenge we've had with moving to Azure is that we have a lot of legacy code that we're going to try and move everything out to Azure. Well, you can't move everything at once, and it really seems like Meyer took this opportunity to say, let's rethink how we do some of these things. So it's, little pieces will go out and, feature flags to make sure we're still calling the old thing and replicating things back to legacy databases to make sure everything's all in sync while we're slowly, piece by piece, moving things out. That's been, a challenge in the planning of it, but, it's like cloud. That's cloud. If you're going to move everything out into the cloud, you can either just put everything out on VM and then fire it up in the cloud, or you can rethink and take this opportunity to rethink how everything is architected and take advantage of a cloud type of architecture, which Meyer's been doing, and it's been slow, but it's been very fruitful. I think there's a lot of good changes going on.
Anytime that happened where you thought through the small incremental migrations, had a plan, got there and went, oh crap, it doesn't work? And anything like that? Or has it been pretty successful with doing that planning up front?
It has been successful. There have been things that I think one of the biggest challenges that we just ran into is, of course, with our data, we'll identify everything that's calling this data, and that's the piece that we're going to move out that's updating this data. And we did have one recently where there's some other stray process updating this data that we didn't know about. Mm-hmm. So that data is not getting out to Azure. So when Azure is replicating back, the data is different. Mm-hmm. So, we've run into a couple of those little scenarios. But with that large of a legacy system,
yep.
You're going to have a couple of these things that you're finding out as you're going. But Meyer's been mitigating a lot of that with feature flags though too. So at first there will only be 10% of the users that are using the Azure services, and if we find any issues we can address them, and maybe 3 people have been affected and we can fix it quickly. So,
that's a really great pragmatic approach to doing things like that.
I want to add on to one of the comments. that J number one made. Basically, yeah, exactly. No, basically the comment about architecting for the cloud is a dramatic difference from architecting for a data center, or architecting for an application that you run on a server. So that's just something that if you're new into this world and you're trying to learn that stuff, work with people that have done it before and understand where the differences can be, because I work with many customers that have just taken and looked at Azure as an extension of their data center and built it the same way they built their data center, and then they run into performance issues or security issues or whatnot. So it's a very valid point, not just from infrastructure, but not just from code, but infrastructure as well.
I want to specialize or focus on something else you said. For the people in the room, how many people use feature flags as part of their application deployments? Okay. Why did the rest of you not raise your hands? That's your homework today. After this group, go home today, tomorrow, whatever. But check out feature flags. There's many ways to do it. There's Microsoft libraries. There's Azure App Configuration. But it's a great way to protect your deployments. Do small incremental tests of things to see that they work without having to do drastic code changes. It's done really well. So we leverage feature flags quite a bit at my place too. So really big fan of that. And I am on a path of evangelizing that, because I don't think enough developers in the C# world know about feature flags. 100%. So go ahead. Question. Great.
I mean, I guess, do you guys ever have trouble selling Azure to people? Like at our company, we use Azure, but we have an IaaS application we've supported. It's 15 years old. It moved from a data center to Azure, pretty much the same. And to be honest, it just works. Like we've upgraded from 3.5 to 8, 4.8 ages ago. We're still on 4.8, so bear with me. But we haven't had to change it all. I try using Azure Functions and I've enjoyed it, but I had to convert from 1 to 2 to 3, from in-proc to isolated or whatever direction it is. And I'm like, the maintenance burden of me constantly coming back just to make sure this thing runs. Not doing anything new. I just want to make sure it runs and is supported. Has been a lot more than I did with my simple IaaS application. And I look at like what I'm doing and I'm like, I don't need the scale and performance things that Azure Functions. I want it to be simple. I want I want to be able to go on the weekends and not work in the evenings. And it doesn't seem like that's what it's giving me. And at a company that's small with a small dev team, like that's a priority over even performance. It's like our manpower is more sacred than our money, at times. And so I don't know. Does that resonate? Am I kind of explaining that? Like,
I can talk to that a little bit, because I feel like that's a complaint I hear occasionally from clients. And what we basically tell them is, probably VMs are the right thing for you.
Okay, and that's what we're doing. It just feels like we're not doing it right. Yeah.
Well, you're talking app services, right? With app services.
Yeah, app services
Sorry,
possibly.
that's exactly. We use app services.
Every kind of layer you move down, you get advantages, right? Of Microsoft's now managing more things for you, but you also get more dependencies on that platform, right?
Yeah.
And you can really almost think of it as like a library or some other base level technology that you're taking dependencies on. Like your risk, if you're not interested in, to Mike's point earlier, if you're not interested in thinking about it differently and keeping it up to date,
yeah,
constantly, semi-constantly maybe is the right word for it.
Sure.
Then if you want to kind of set it and forget it, then maybe VM's more the right solution for you, keeping in mind that you're giving up a lot of the platform as a service advantages as well.
Cool. Yeah, and that's exactly the balance we take, and it's like, it seems like a lot of the time we're not using the coolest, newest stuff, and I really want to, but I also don't want to be,
right.
I want to write new stuff, not maintain my old stuff.
Azure Function was a bit unique too, because it was a different paradigm of how they were building the application. And I just went through an Azure Function V1 to V4 transition too, so I totally relate.
Yeah.
But I also knew, like, when we were going on to it, we were going on to like early days application. This is a new type of structure they're doing. Right, and so, and they went to 2 to 3, and I'm like, yeah, probably still adjusting. And so then they got to 4, I'm like, okay, it's on core, and we're ready to make the shift. But there, number one, there's other technologies to approach, whether you talk about Hangfire. So that's another one that's like a background job server operation, where you're doing more of a monolithic application structure that manages that as a single server instead of the slicing and dicing that Azure Functions does, which is the key value there. But that's the same reason why I've struggled of going on new Microsoft technologies such as Blazor. Like, and I really want to get on Blazor, but I'm like, let's wait for it to stabilize a little bit. So it's like you get on early days anything. It's not out of the oven yet.
But Azure Functions 4 is not early days anymore, and it did change from in-proc. Is it in-proc to
Isolated.
isolated? That change was not completely seamless, and it's just again, it's like there was zero value from my perspective besides moving to 4 to maintain support. And yeah,
I think that does come back to that architecture comment earlier, like Jay mentioned, was really it's like, what do you want? Like, do you want to be new and cool, and that's why you're doing it, or do you need the functionality of this feature to move to that? And then once you make that decision, then it's a little bit easier kind of back into where it makes sense. And working with people that have, like these guys that have been around in the development field for a long time in Azure can help you kind of find the sweet spot where you're not doing a ton of, like, my opinion is get away from, I focus my jobs focusing on IaaS, but if I'm running it, I'm trying to find ways that are going to make my job easier. And if it's updating functions every couple months, maybe that's not the right way to do it. Maybe we go to an app service or somewhere in the middle.
sure.
Is this really a function challenge? I mean, the functions are just aligning with the .NET release of that code. Right? If you still want to run 4.8 on Azure Functions, you can do that with V1. That's still fully supported.
I thought some of like the Azure Functions 3, like they were
Yeah, because
2.
that aligns with .NET Core 3.1, and the version 4 aligns with .NET Core
Oh, I didn't know that.
6, 8,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Well, maybe I'm being too aggressive in my upgrades or something like that. I guess.
So
I thought a lot
you're
of it
not
was
forced
not-
to upgrade. And
Yeah.
obviously, they're dropping support for, say, runtime version 3, because .NET Core 3 and 4 are no longer supported. So that
There's
goes away.
the runtime that you're using, and then you're talking more about like the model, like
Yeah.
isolated model versus what was the old one called?
In process.
In process model, and I believe that one was more of a hard shift, like they were retiring one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
in .NET 8.
A lot of the in-process stuff was attached specifically to the LTS, and you had no control over what was going on in your application.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be something changes, but I don't think that one's going to be changed. I think that is more of we're getting to the point functions have built their paradigm,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, guessing .NET Runtime is built in .NET pretty deeply, and so it had that advantage of being an early adopter, but it also was having some unique limitations of that legacy.
Sounds like Azure Functions deep dive talk needs to come back for another round,
Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah, all right. I can do
so,
that.
Future session on just Azure Functions could be added to the schedule.
I mean, maybe if there's other. I'd be curious if there's other. We're your basic database. We have a web app service, APIs, that kind of stuff, but we don't use a ton of Azure, of the fancy things. Like we don't use Azure Functions extensively because of that reason. Is there other services that Azure that you guys would suggest would be I'm trying to say my category of stuff, like things that are for
App services
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Mike was talking about.
Yeah, or step back and understand what you're trying to do with that function, and there might be like that silver bullet for you.
There are options. There's app services. There's container apps. There's static
Yeah.
web apps. Many pros and cons to all those. But yeah, know that there's more now than there was even a year ago.
All the people on this part of the table would say hire a consulting company.
You're also there, like, change the paradigm of the server. I don't know if in your case, but we used to always treat them as kind of pets. And they long live, and we care for them, and we patch them.
It's totally, yeah.
Just kill it every time. Stop treating
Sure.
that server. Get into like
Maybe we'll take
Packer
that one
or
off the
Vagrant.
recording.
Use images and answer
Totally,
the puppet
yeah.
and configure it, and then when it comes time
That
to
speaks to me.
replace
We
it,
definitely have our pets.
float away.
One
We
other
do
thing you
too.
could look at.
We're trying to get rid of them.
That's completely outside the scale of what we're talking about, though, is like logic apps could be a solution for you, depending on what your problem is. So there are a bunch of different options. You could start by just jumping on like Copilot and asking, like, here's what I'm trying to do. What would you recommend in Azure? And see if it comes to functions. And then use that as a conversation starter with other people.
This totally got off. I started a rant focused on Azure Functions, and so I'm sorry. Back to whatever the questions are.
For what it's worth, I'll add one other thing to it, which is that my read on it, and I'm not an expert, but my read on it is that shift was a one-time early shift.
Gotcha.
Even though it's version 4, that programming model was a model that wasn't super well thought through or designed at first, and so this is a shift that I don't think you're going to see change. Version 5 isn't going to say now you have to redo the model again.
Sure.
I think this is a little more settled at this point. So
Now I can commit to it, okay.
yeah, but
It
it's
will
still the
change.
cloud, and it will eventually change.
I think it was the solution.
JB says I could commit to it.
It was a solution to counteract Lambda functions, right?
Yeah.
So we came up with something, and obviously, like Jay said, it wasn't right at first, and that's the thing about Microsoft is I learned this early on. It was a really weird learning. I was applying for a role in the program group, and it was like a technical role there, and they're like, what do you think about like putting out an MVP for a product? Do you want it to be, should it be perfect, or what's your thought on it? I'm like, oh yeah, it should be perfect. And I'm not a developer, so I'm like, this is the way the infrastructure needs to be. And they're like, no, you just got to get the release out there as fast as possible, see what happens, MVP, and then iterate on that. And I know that we do that. So it's definitely a perfect example is functions, but it's all over the place.
Yeah. It's the move fast, break things mentality that I think a lot of the world wants.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Not everybody.
It's challenging, especially when you've got this application that's lived for hundreds of years, and you want to try to make it cool. Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to make sure we get to the headline question for the day, which is how do you Azure? And we can keep discussing for sure, but this might bring up a whole other set of tangents, which we're all really good at in the tech space. So, guys, there's lots of ways to use Azure, right? And I'm thinking about like day-to-day things. You've got to get into a resource. You've got to figure out, is it this performance pricing tier? Is it this SKU? Is it this detail of this setting and this secret? There's like 3, 4, 5 ways to do that. I'm curious if you go down the line here. What is your like go-to option, and maybe what's your second choice of if you need to interact with something in Azure?
Well, for me personally, I'm in the portal a lot. I'll just, when I'm just looking around, seeing how things are doing, I'll go into the portal and click around until I find what I need. Anything that we're doing where we're going to be creating resources, I don't even know if I have access to do that in our lower level environment, but we do.
For the recording
try.
the people are shaking their head no.
If you do,
Yeah.
If I do, there's a problem, let me know.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have. Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
should have said I have full access in our lower environments, and that's. But for creating resources, any of that sort of management, with as many resources as we have, and there's hundreds, I would need maybe thousands. I don't know. There's a lot of different resources.
What Meyer has?
Yeah.
Oh, it's over 50,000 resources in
Yeah,
Azure.
that's
This is
awesome.
everything.
Yeah, I'm thinking only of what I see, and it's
Yeah, we just broke that a couple weeks ago.
you just broke 50,000.
Is that a celebrate type of thing, or like, oh man?
I'm celebrating.
But for creating and managing these resources, we have a lot of Terraform scripts, and we manage what gets deployed through these Terraform scripts with this JSON that's all checked into source control, and it defines the variables that these Terraform scripts are doing, so that are running through to make sure that everything that's going out is consistent, and it does a lot of the grunt work for us too. If we could just say this is multi-region, and then it's going to make sure these resources are created and named appropriately in different regions. So there is a lot of infrastructure built up with these Terraform scripts that take care of a lot of that management of the resources for us, which is very helpful when it gets large.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd be in the portal all day clicking.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, like Jay, I pretty much it starts in the portal, and that's probably 80% of the time, and then it eventually moves to some sort of CI/CD thing with infrastructure as code, either Bicep or Terraform usually, and that's kind of the end of the story. I know there's CLIs, and we just don't ever need it for that. It feels more infrastructure focused for that need, and so at an automation level, the infrastructure as code, Terraform, Bicep, whatever works perfectly for our needs. I guess it kind of reminds me if anybody goes to software development conferences where the Microsoft folks demo new features, they'll almost always show right in Visual Studio going to the publish setting, right? And then the smarter, longer in the tooth Microsoft employees will always say, don't ever use this. Look how easy this is, don't ever use this. Right? So that's kind of, I feel like, where we live is when we're trying to quick do something to see if it's going to work, get it out there and let the client look at it and say, like, is this how you want it? It'll be in the portal, and then when we're ready to make it more production ready, then we move over into CI/CD.
Yeah, my experience is much the same. So the different types of customers I work with are all over the place. So sometimes it's they're a huge AWS shop that's coming to Azure, so they need to learn step one. So we do like a education on the portal, help them get through that way to show them that it's capable of doing it. And then we take it a step further. A lot of these places are Terraform shops, so I want to integrate their Terraform into provision in both places. Personally, when I'm trying to do something in Azure, Portal makes sense if it's a one-off thing, but if it's going to be repeatable, then I do leverage the CLI. So I'll write a PowerShell script in the CLI, and then I'll automate repeatable instances or repeatable things that I can do through that process. Or if I'm trying to give something to a peer, I usually do it in that place too.
It's a good way to spend money faster.
Yeah, our goal is to get working as fast as possible.
That's right.
Do you also use the Cloud Shell in the portal?
Occasionally, most of the time I'll do like an easy login on my machine and in VS Code, and then do what I'm going to do through there. So most of my scripts are automated that way, where I've got the script in my VS Code, I'm running the terminal below it.
You mentioned you use a lot of PowerShell. Do you use Azure PowerShell, or do you typically stick to the AZ CLI?
Most of the time it's the AZ CLI for me.
Has anybody played around with Copilot in the Azure portal?
A tiny bit.
Yeah.
He has bad resource graph queries.
Yeah.
I've had that experience.
So
Yeah.
regarding infrastructure as code, Terraform, obviously there's different flavors and variants of it, right? You have the dry aspect of vanilla Terraform that can get very cumbersome when your resources grow. Then there's variants of that solve that problem, like TerraGrunt. But specifically with Bicep, can you speak to two things? One, about the state and capacity of Bicep. I'm an Amazon user. I run the Amazon users group, so I have a lot of experience with CloudFormation. I'm not a big fan of Terraform, but I've used Terraform and Pulumi for a lot of engagements that I've been on. So the big question I have is around Bicep specifically. I've used it at a limited capacity, but from a support perspective, for your normal customer that has a regular EA agreement that's between 1,000 and 2,000 customers, what's the support like for Bicep deployment issues? And have you ran into anything at a scale issue with Terraform that's maybe for a customer that doesn't want to pay for Terraform Cloud but is using Azure Blob Backed for their state? Can you speak to the support aspect of Bicep versus the capacity for Terraform?
Support? I kept hearing support, and I kept thinking maybe Mike can answer that.
The reason I ask is because you think that the native service would be the go-to solution because you're paying, it's a service offered by them. So curious.
Most people that I work with, and I'm going to call on Matt too in a minute here, because Matt did for one of these presentations a Terraform and Bicep demo that was the most educational thing for me on Bicep personally. But what I'm going to say is most of the time from that scenario, Microsoft people will not impede on what the business objective is of the customer. So if your business objective is to support multi-cloud, and you might be a little bit behind on the modules or whatever, stay with Terraform across the board. If your business objective is to be like a Microsoft first shop and you want to have the features available right away, then you go with Bicep as a learning option. I'm never going to tell a customer that's already using Terraform, hey, you should use Bicep, unless you need to solve this one problem.
So can I throw another hypothetical at you? Let's say you're deploying a couple virtual machines with Azure and you want to accomplish the same thing with Bicep, but you're not paying for Terraform Cloud, right? So you don't have a first line support. If you call up Microsoft support and you have support in your agreement, are they going to help you with the state issues of your Terraform backend, or are they not going to say, well, I'm sorry, we're not officially, like, I know they provide designs and everything else, but are they going to support you through that, or would they do so with Bicep if you had a similar kind of deployment issue?
I don't know, honestly. At the level that I'm at, when I was in the role of the CSA, so a cloud solution architect that helps customers, I would dive in with the customer to try to solve the problem. And a lot of the peers that I worked with would, and that would fall like in that app innovation space where I was in infrastructure. So the app innovation people definitely dive in and help solve problems, because if you're trying to deploy stuff on Azure and we want you to be successful, because obviously that makes you want to use it more, they're going to dive in and try to help you. If you're calling our support phone number, it's going to be a hit or miss. If you get somebody that's excellent at it or somebody that's new at it, you may get a good experience or a bad experience. Traditionally, the experience isn't the best. Like, if I'm just being completely fair and honest.
I've dealt with Microsoft support before.
Yeah, so
I mean, I know what you mean.
And I got a guy on my team that was in support, and the dude's fantastic, but he was the exception and not the rule, if I'm being completely fair. So, yeah, it depends. They're going to try their best to help you, and they're going to probably escalate up until they get to somebody that will help you, but you might not have the best experience with that. But if you're working with an account team and you do have support and you get a cloud solution architect engaged with you and they know it's a pain point for you, they're going to do everything they can to try to get past that.
Yeah, I can echo that too, because like I've had a very large customer here in West Michigan use Terraform, have issues, and Microsoft support has been just horrible, saying it wasn't them, and we ended up all finding out that it was them, and they were still trying to deny it, right? But we've had other people further away, much smaller organizations, have a Bicep issue, call support, and the person helped us that minute. Like, it really is like, they're so big.
Depends on who picks up.
It depends on who you get.
Give us the phone number of the second one, please.
I would assume that since Bicep is one of their service offerings, they would have a better better overall support for it, because it's something that they're offering to you as a service.
Sure. But also
It's
one of their
so new,
newer options.
One of the tricks
Yeah.
of Bicep is it's sitting on top of the ARM templates that
Right.
are actually
Yeah.
what's going on in the background, and yeah, I don't.
Yep. But no, good point. Good. Did you have anything you wanted to add, or you?
One thing I thought of is just, or maybe two, is that generally you mentioned the Bicep support is much faster, right? So a new SKU rolls out or a new feature rolls out, that's going to get it really fast, and Terraform is going to take longer.
Because it's reading our APIs directly, so the feature is available in the API, then
Right.
it's going to access it.
Yep. So from that sense of support, there's better support there. The other thing I'll say is that my team that does DevOps work loves Terraform and really loves Bicep. So it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to use.
I've used Bicep, and I thought it was awesome since the minute I used it. Like, blown away by. The only gripe that I would have is that if there was more parity with the features that you use that's behind the Graph API. Entra ID type of stuff, it's not quite there yet.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that's all in flux and constantly moving, right?
Yep. It is still relatively new.
And I think one of the biggest challenges with Bicep that Terraform doesn't have is that with Bicep, Azure is your state. You don't have
Right.
a separate
You don't have to worry
state
about your
file.
backend.
And so as people are going in there like Jay and clicking through and making changes in the portal, it tends to get out of sync with whatever is in your Bicep template. And it's not always easy to reconcile, whereas with the Terraform state, it's going to pull that into the state, and you can see that right away. And so I do like Terraform from that perspective, in that we do have that state file and it can easily detect things that are out of sync. Whereas Bicep, if something's out of sync, it's sometimes difficult to tell if it's just because Bicep is reporting it that way or because Jay made a change in the portal. Bicep does tend to report things as being a little bit different, even though nothing has actually changed. You can run the same Bicep template and right now, and then run it again 2 minutes later, and it's going to show you some changes even though nothing has changed.
So it's a little noisy.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot with Bicep specifically because my firm is very Terraform heavy. They don't have a lot of Bicep expertise in being in the Azure space, and it very much that ClickOps going to any kind of IAC is amazing, because you can just export out, decompile, and all of a sudden you have a working infrastructure as code.
Oh, interesting.
And I think they're trying to do that with Terraform, but it leaves behind, because you can just get the ARM template and go to Bicep, and it's super fast, like 5 minutes. but it's extremely noisy if you're trying anything like that planning aspect, the what if functionality. I've submitted my own like 10 different issues of, hey, this is causing some noise.
Pulumi. I've used Pulumi as well for non-cloud-based things. I like it quite a bit. It uses a lot of the same providers that Terraform does because it's Go under the hood. But any experience with Pulumi in Azure?
I don't have any.
No.
Actually, it's the first time I've heard of it. But
It's instead of being declarative like Terraform, it's imperative, and you can write. They have, I think, 5 different languages supports. I think there's C#, Python, JavaScript. They have YAML. It's very, very flexible, but instead of it being declarative and having miles-long, Terraform templates, you can. I mean, a for loop didn't exist in Terraform until what, .12 or something. So all of your native programming constructs exist in Pulumi to do the same thing you could do in Terraform, but it's more programmer-friendly if that's your bag.
well, now I got 2 things I'm going to look up. I'm going to look up that and the flags.
Yeah.
A lot of developers would now put, I have 45 seconds of Pulumi expertise on my resume.
The no state that Matt was mentioning, because we used ARM before Terraform, and we moved to Terraform before Bicep was a thing, and that was our big challenge. ARM templates, no state. Somebody'd come along in the middle of the night and go, oh, this needs 2 more CPUs, and then we'd come along the next day and execute the ARM template and wipe it right out. And then the next night, somebody'd be going, why did it crash again, or why did it
Yeah.
Because we were constantly fighting that. I like to say, use the portal as read-only, administrative, don't change anything, do that.
Lock the gate and don't let anybody in.
Sometimes you have to,
Yep.
whether it's mistakes before, not supported, or it's the middle of the night and I'm not going to cut a branch and try to find somebody to approve a PR. So I'm scaling it up and we'll worry about that's tomorrow's problem.
Azure being the state of Bicep is both its biggest win and its biggest loss.
All right, we've got time for maybe 2, maybe 3 more, depending on how things go. I've got 4 categories here. I'm going to poll the audience. Would you rather hear architecture and implementation, security and governance, DevOps, or AI? What category would you like me to pull a question?
Security and governance person.
Security and governance? Give them some
Security,
nodding
governance,
heads.
DevOps.
All right, so let's see. We have
All
3
against AI.
choices.
Everyone AI to death?
I think I'm going to go to Bill because it's all.
I'm going to do the easy one first, guys. And I'm going to go with more the governance side of the fence. Any good tips you can give people who are watching or listening? How do you manage costs in an easy way and prevent cloud sprawl in Azure? Or what's a mistake you see your clients often make in that realm?
Oh,
Yeah.
I do have a good one that I think Matt is intimately familiar with.
Okay.
We have a couple million users, and we write all our code to log a lot, so we know what's going on. And those logs in production with millions of users got out of control. I think, I forget the number you told me, but it was 10 times what I thought it was.
As far as our cost goes?
Yeah, cost.
Yeah, about 3.6 million.
Yeah.
Just for logs.
Yes.
Yes.
He says log a lot, but his definition of a lot and mine are totally different. Because some of these teams are logging, here's the JSON coming in, here's the JSON going out.
Everything.
They log everything.
Yeah. And in lower environments, when you're doing some debugging, it's nice to see everything that happened. But once that gets out to production, that's with millions of users, that becomes a huge problem. And then Matt made sure that we're doing sampling in production. We get all errors, of course, but any of that sort of informational stuff that's getting logged, that was a big one that we ran into with sprawl, but easily managed.
Was that the main fix, and was just switching to sampling and not fixing the source of logging 8 kilobyte JSON messages?
There were some talks about what we logged too. Yeah,
Just curious.
yeah.
Changing the verbosity, for example,
Yeah.
so that you're not logging all information and debug messages, but maybe warning and above.
Yeah.
A silver bullet type of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you using for logging? Are you talking App Insights?
Yeah. These were all the App Insights logs. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
2 things off the top of my head. Number 1, control who can create things is a pretty good way to keep an eye on that. That's a mistake we see a lot of clients start with. Well, it would just be nice, if this person's on vacation, we want this person to be able to pitch in. If there's an issue, they can change things. And so it's kind of like everybody gets, global access at first, and then you're like locking that down. The other one that I really like is the cost management module has alerts that you can set up. And we use that internally. We have sort of a dev test subscription that we use internally at Trailhead for a lot of things. And people will set something up, test it out, say, yeah, this is going to work great for the client, and then leave it running forever, right? And so alerts that basically say like, hey, your spending went up, and then you can go see what's new, and or your spending went above a certain threshold. That type of thing is really helpful. Keep an eye on that.
Well, there's a hidden tip in there.
Yeah.
The idea of the dev test subscription versus the real stuff.
Yeah.
Have you ever used the runbooks feature to like shut it down when it reaches above a threshold?
No, not automatically.
Yeah, we're not that brave either.
I want someone to tell me how it works.
We use a lot of budget alerts too, but we haven't done anything to actually impact.
There's an open source tool that's multi-cloud called Cloud Custodian. It's YAML policy driven. You declare a policy in your provider and it'll deploy the necessary functions, but you can set things to do like turn off your workloads that are not production off hours automatically, scale down your container workloads to 0 or 1. That I've never used it on Azure, but I've used it on Google Cloud and Amazon, and it's amazing.
I know it's supposed to be supported because it was in my cert exam, but I just have never actually written it and got it to successfully work.
So I have a little, being infrastructure, I have a different perspective on this. This is like a bread and butter kind of topic for us with our customers. There's a lot of ways that we have conversations with customers. It all falls back on like the CAF ready model. And if you ever look at Azure Enterprise Scale Landing Zones, there's a lot of prescriptive guidance in there for this topic. But to talk about some of the things that I've been hearing, and these are great points, but some of the things that we do is we organize like a hierarchical model of management groups and subscriptions, and at each layer you kind of do like a lowest common denominator, and then that lowest common denominator can tell you what is allowed. So some of the ways we manage cost control in large environments, instead of like Jay mentioned, only giving people access to stuff, maybe some customers want to give people access and empower them to everything, but put guardrails around that, and that's where Azure policy and this hierarchical model makes sense. And then also cost management, there's a lot of ways to deploy like set a policy in a management group that says every resource cannot be created in this management group, or resource group can't be created unless there's a certain tag in there for cost management purposes, and then another policy that pushes that down to every resource that's in that resource group. So that way, if people are abusing the system or they're trying to deploy servers that are going to run forever that cost $10,000 a month, you can put policy in place to not let that happen. And then to your point about like the runbook stuff, I've looked at a lot of different creative ways to do that for customers. We usually recommend like a sandbox subscription, and then a sandbox subscription can have policies that are kicked off automatically to shut down services after 5 o'clock at night or whatever, so you know that, or wipe it once a week. I'm going to look into that too. That product you just talked about is really, that sounds really cool. I haven't heard of that one yet because I focus mostly on Azure, but we try to do it within our own tools by having a multi-cloud thing that can spin that stuff up quickly and manage that. It sounds really cool.
In our lower environments, like our sandbox proof of concept subscriptions, we threw in you can tag your resource with an expiration date, and it'll get killed automatically.
Yeah, I've written that.
Just some stuff we wrote to go through, look at those tags. But we don't do it in our other places. You don't want to go rogue and ghostwire.com or something.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt.
And I floated that for customers, and some of them are like, this is what we want. And they're like, okay, well, we can enforce this tag exists, and you could use that tag to make an action that happens. But then they're like, oh, maybe that's a little too scary for that. So then they change the mentality.
We do all the policies like you're saying. We call it an app ID, but it's the ID that identifies it in accounting. We tag everything with that. We have a policy that forces it to be required. If it's at the resource group, we have a policy that will propagate it down to the resources. So everything's always, most things are tagged.
Yeah.
So in your situation, you're tying into a database resource to identify all the apps and the ownership and the cost centers aside to it.
Yeah, the tagging is kind of, you do it in your deployment, you got a number.
Right, I mean, you're doing the code, you're going to be able to tag it, but I'm more curious about how you actually map the real existing IDs. So You know, is it like statically defined, or are you making queries to build those while you build?
You actually request it from the IT project office. They assign
Gotcha.
an app ID for your application, who's the owner, the manager, the director, et cetera. It goes in that kind of that database.
So it's defined in process.
Yep, and then once you have that ID, you use it in your automation to tag anything up in Azure. And then that API is being pulled from AppTio, pull all that
Yep.
cost data in. And now you can do it by manager, director, application, vertical, all those things.
Does Azure have a built-in service or tool that will make cost recommendations for you? I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned the cost alerting. Have you reached a certain threshold, but is there some kind of a
So
It's
cost advisor.
Yeah.
cost advisor?
It's under Azure Advisor. There's a cost, there's security,
There's
there's
a couple.
operational excellence.
They're pretty good.
Yeah.
There's a calculator, like
Yeah.
you don't even have to be logged in to use.
Yeah. What's the state of Azure native observability, and is it something that a lot of customers are using, or are they usually turning to third-party services like Sumo Logic, Datadog, etc.? What's your experience with that as consultants?
I mean, I would say the native stuff would be App Insights. Really,
How robust is it in comparison to these paid features? You know, because for example, Datadog is going to cost you an arm and a leg, but it can be
Yeah.
very much worth the spend because of the user experience that it gives you and the things it gives you out of the box. You don't have to pay somebody
Yeah.
to develop.
yeah.
That's been my experience with our clients, is that the out-of-the-box stuff is fine for 80% of people, but if you want to go to that enterprise level features, then you want to use something like that.
Okay.
Almost all those vendors have made what are called sidecars in Azure,
Yeah.
where you can sideload it into a container,
Yeah.
and their product then just works. So
feed it to a function.
very little
you tell
work you
an
have to
agent.
do. Yeah,
It's not about
pretty
the
cool.
ease of use, it's the
Well,
cost of Datadog that's the problem.
there's New Relic, there's others. I mean,
Yeah,
they all
just-
have
Core
costs.
Logics. There's
Yeah.
a million of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dynatrace is another
Yeah.
big one.
It's not cheap.
And it is all over the place. Like if I'm talking to you as a customer, I'm going to see if I'm always going to fall back to what are you trying to accomplish, and if it's up down basic stuff, app insights into the application about performance and stuff like that, we're going to be like, hey, this seems like a good fit for you. Let's try it out. But if you need the extra robust features that we can't support with Azure Monitor and all the things that lay underneath it, then Datadog, Dynatrace, New Relic, whatever. Yeah, we're never going to tell you it's not a good idea to do that.
I know there's never a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
I should always preface my question of an enterprise between 1 and 2,000 people.
Yeah. And even then, like I'll take the conversation with my monster-sized customers and have the same, what are you trying to do? And what are you doing already? What's your vision? Where you want to go
Yeah.
with it? And then try to fit, if it makes sense, with the 100% customers. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. They just,
Right. It's all about your needs.
yeah, and is the tool going to fit?
Yeah.
Let's do one more question on security seconds. I think I've got a good one here. But before I do that, tagging. I'm with you, Russ. I think like we've done very similar things for our clients. We make the chargeback center one of our required tags half the time that we work. I think tagging could be a session here for the group just to see how people use tags, because there's so many ways that you can possibly do it and so many creative ideas I've heard just even today. So I'm going to add that to the list. Azure Functions and tagging, two topics coming up this year. When it comes to security,
And networking what?
Add global networking.
global networking, okay. Do you want to speak?
We got it.
Yeah. We could do that. We can find somebody.
Javier would be awesome.
Security is such a big deal in today's world. There are daily issues where you hear massive breaches, vulnerabilities. Let's try to think of what's one security-related tip around either like securing an API or a resource, a VM, whatever. Just maybe either something that's a tip in the security space for everyone who's listening, or a no-no, like definitely don't do this. I think I'm just trying to make it a little bit easier to answer by saying something that comes to mind in that security space that you immediately red flag it if you see it, or it's a, hey, we should always do this, guys. Maybe that's not such an easy question to answer, so I'll just keep talking for a few seconds.
Someone say
Passwords in a
something.
key vault.
Yeah.
Someone say managed identities.
No
No
WAF on
passwords.
public-facing workloads.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of things that popped into my head, like Key Vault is a big one.
No passwords,
Yes.
no API keys.
Yes.
Yep.
Manage your secrets well.
If you
It's
are
on the
using them,
recording.
stop sharing them in chat.
Yeah.
I think one of the simplest things is really focusing on the identity. and going with the new stuff that's available today. Go with the passwordless bio authentication, things like that. I'm pushing. So my role, I haven't really talked about it yet, but the global black belt role that I'm in, our solution area is focused, and I'm focused on Linux. So I'm trying to think of creative ways to make Linux more secure within Microsoft and outside of Microsoft. And part of that is using Entra ID as your primary authenticated provider, and then putting extensions on to make the Linux boxes be able to SSH in securely into those boxes and not have like a sprawl of users or a third-party service. You can bring it all into one. And so with identity, you bring in like multi-factor should be on all of your accounts. You have conditional access policies. You have the capabilities to, within Entra ID, to make sure that the identity is secure and not on the dark web, things like that. So there's a lot of, you start with identity and break it down from there. There's a lot of other places we can talk about from a security perspective, but that's a good place to start.
Implement PIM.
Yeah,
Like I said,
yeah.
we're using that now for all the access. We won't walk around with any standing rights.
That's great. And once you start with that Entra ID or whatever product you're using, to have that first layer not be compromised, and then make sure you're checking it it's the zero, what is it, the zero?
Zero trust.
Zero trust, thank you. Zero trust model where you're authenticating against everything they're trying to access, but it starts with identity.
We go a step further, like so some of us on the cloud side, we have capability to get lots of access. We don't use our normal identities either. So we have an administrative ID that we use to PIM up to something with owner or contributor. That way, if I forget to disable it or whatever, and then that password, I don't know that password, I have to check it out every 7 hours.
That's awesome. That's a smart way to do it.
And it's very expensive though.
It's slow. I don't know what it costs. I should check. Oh, we pay for it.
Oops, I couldn't get it at my last client.
Yeah, it's an uptick on the license, and when you're spending
yeah,
that
we
over.
probably already had the licensing.
They get all kinds of good discounts because they spend so much. But yeah, they
50,000 resources.
yeah, exactly, 50,000 resources. I'll never forget. I went to the security conference here in Grand Rapids, GRCon. Yeah, one time, like right before COVID, and a guy came up there, and one of the presentations I sat in, and it was exactly about that, about having your primary account for your domain and then your administrator account. Guy logged in with administrative credentials. The bad guy got in, captured his stuff, and basically showed how you can go up into the system and everything. And this was different before the cloud days, but still the fact that not doing that can have a lot of adverse consequences if you don't. So it's a really smart practice.
There's some services around security for custom development, like APIs. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but there's one that you can put in front of your APIs that works sort of like a firewall.
APIM.
What is it?
API manager.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There's another one as well.
So in front of APIM, like a lot of our customers that are doing OpenAI right now, they're putting APIM in the front, and then they're putting like App Gateway or Azure Front Door in front of that.
Front door, yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
It can be really, really useful, especially if you're worried about like distributed denial of service, or if you want something that's smart enough to detect when a particular IP seems to be doing suspicious things to your API to shut it down. It's pretty useful.
Yeah. Even talk about the next steps, like after all this, right? Start getting much more into microsegmentation across all our applications. Talk about why does our non-prod be able to talk to prod? Because it's all in Azure, but why do we not stop that? We're even talking about maybe separate domains, which Microsoft is doing internally.
Mm-hmm.
So going to non-prod being a completely different tenant, like it used to be years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, like the old school day. Yeah, that's a smart way to do it, because it's really the isolation and performance and all that stuff, and you could put them in different areas within the same region. By using like availability groups and put them in different data centers, or you could put them in completely different regions to segregate that data. We got some customers that are so, like I work with a lot of financial customers too, and then they'll microsegment everything. So Azure Firewall in the middle, and all north, south, east, west goes right through that. Some of them do Palos in north, south, and then the firewall, Azure Firewall in the middle. It all depends on what you're trying to isolate for, but those are all good practices.
Jay, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the API security, what my team is doing, we do have APIM in front of everything, and you can't call APIM without the subscription key. And then behind that, I believe it's front door right behind that, and then and front door is locked down. It can only take calls from APIM, and then our apps are behind front door, and then they're locked down, so they only take calls from front door. So once we deploy something out there, until we have APIM up, we're calling one URL for testing it, and then once we get it behind APIM, we can't hit it directly anymore. Now we got to have our subscription key and go through APIM through the official door to make these calls. So
is it through private network, private links, or is it through like application security groups? Do you know?
I don't know.
It depends.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of stuff that's kind of more legacy and still just on the public side. And then a lot of the newer stuff we're doing is 100% private networking.
That's where a lot of businesses are going to.
That's our goal. It's hard to turn that
It's
ship
very
fast.
challenging.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
very challenging.
It brings in a whole nother wrinkle for the teams.
Which
Definitely
it
impacts that
typically-
velocity a little bit.
You'll typically get like a CISO comes in and says, I want private link on everything or private networking only on everything, and then the teams are struggling on how to get that set up, and it introduces a significant wrinkle because it's not just private networking, it's DNS, and it's the way that the routes take their traffic and all that stuff.
Network
Express
security
route,
groups
all
in
that kind of
between.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I would suggest if you had it backwards, like if you have front door behind APIM, you're not taking advantage of what front door can do. So we could talk about that later. Maybe this is just backwards.
I'm interested. Yeah.
Because like front door is really built to be a global endpoint to get you to your resources the fastest, and then it's that first layer. It should be the first layer, but it could be the other way. There's a lot of different architectures and different business needs, like I keep saying.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's more of a vestibule, the way you've got it.
Yeah, I know. I talked to somebody today, one of our customers, who uses front door to actually watch their e-commerce site, and if someone attempts to check out that last step too fast in the same second, it is smart enough to like shut that down for that session. Like there's a lot of things you can do with front door as a WAF that it's just like in there. You don't even have to like do much other than configure URL and time, and super useful resource if you're not using it.
Is that the name of the WAF service, front door?
Azure Front Door.
Do they have managed rules that are kind of like a one-size-fits-all for typical
There's a
workloads?
couple managed in the library, and then you can bring your own.
There's that little rule set where you can,
Yep.
if my header's this, I go to this backend pool.
it does the basics like I can't remember, was it SYS that does the rule sets that it does, and then it does SQL injection and a bunch of stuff. But when you turn it on, it protects against a lot of stuff right away. And then you can do all kinds. Like I dove really deep in this last year, all kinds of configuration with the amount of domains that are accepted on it and the routes that they take in the back end. And you can do some real cool stuff with like Nginx and AKS in the background, where you can send stuff to different pools based on how they came in. It's really slick stuff.
All right, everyone. Well, I'm sure we could probably sit here and talk all Azure for another couple hours, but it actually appears that we're out of time. I want to thank everyone for listening and participating, but I think we should give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you. Fantastic job. Maybe we'll have to do this format again, because it feels like we got a lot of good conversation today, which is fantastic. And I didn't have to do any slides, so that's a super fun win for me. A couple of closing statements. Number one, we already have next month lined up, minus location, but speaker. So Chris Woodruff is going to speak for us next month. The topic is on either CI/CD or AI or a combination of those two things. I apologize, I don't remember, but because we have it locked in faster, we'll be able to get the website updated faster this time. So website at Meetup will be updated faster. Remember to join our Discord community. If you don't have a link to that, find me afterwards or Matt, and we'll get you the invites. Locally, there are two fantastic developer conferences coming up. The first one is Merge, hosted by Software GR at the Eberhard Center on April 28th, all day. I'm actually speaking at that one. I got selected, yay. And then later in summer, Beer City Code, August 8th and 9th. 8th is the workshop day, 9th is the full session, and it goes into the evening. So tickets are on sale right now for merge, and tickets will be on sale very quickly.
Momentarily.
Like possibly tonight, tomorrow, for Beer City Code, because you're talking to the organizers of said event. So
Has the agenda been set for Beer City Code?
it's like
Almost
super
there.
close to being published.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the tickets come with, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nobody
Yeah.
will buy a ticket until we announce.
That's
the-
what I'm saying, like, I'm not.
Yeah. Which is at Calvin University, right? Yep, still, yes, sorry, it's getting long in the day. I can't recommend either of those more. They're great, they're local, they're not very expensive compared to other national conferences that we all go to. So, again, I want to thank Cameron and K Group Companies for hosting us. I want to thank Matt for recording and the panelists. That's all we got tonight, guys.
Thanks.